Get ready. The global economy is teetering on the edge of chaos. Donald Trump's worst fears are becoming reality right before our eyes. The world is turning away from the US dollar. And do you know who is leading this shift? China. China is no longer playing by the rules. It's openly challenging Trump and the entire United States. After years of sanctions, microchip bans, export restrictions, and harsh tariffs, Beijing has had enough. China is no longer just defending itself, it's striking at the heart. Trump has always said, if any country abandons the dollar, I'll hit them with tariffs. But China doesn't care. Why? Because China has something to offer, and the US desperately needs it. The Americans are not just blocking Chinese goods at the border, they want to push China out of the global financial system altogether. Last month, US officials went so far as to order the Asian Development Bank to stop issuing loans to China, claiming the country is now too wealthy for such aid. For Beijing, this wasn't just a political jab, it was a public humiliation. And now, Scott Bessent is openly pressuring other countries to cut business ties with China entirely. The stakes are incredibly high, and the whole world is watching as this clash between superpowers threatens to blow up global stability. So let's break down what's really going on. To begin with, where did this conflict come from? For many years, China was officially classified as a developing country. That was the label given by major international institutions like the World Bank, the United Nations, and the Asian Development Bank. On the surface, it didn't seem like a big deal. But here's where it gets interesting. That status gave China a number of benefits, and now the United States wants to put a stop to it. Western countries were comfortable thinking of China as developing. It made them feel superior, but they ignored a key fact. That label isn't just a name, it comes with real privileges. Developing countries get access to cheap loans, relaxed trade rules, and special treatment in global markets. All of this was originally designed to help poor nations catch up with wealthier economies. Of course, China doesn't like being called developing. Its economy has long outpaced most developed nations, and technologically it's far ahead. But if that label brings money and advantages, why not use it? And that's exactly what China has done. When the United States realized its mistake, it began insisting that China no longer deserved this status. China now has the second largest economy in the world. In 2025, its nominal GDP was valued at $19.2 trillion, and by purchasing power parity, a staggering $43 trillion, making it the largest economy in real terms. China is no longer just a factory floor. It's modern cities, cutting-edge tech, and massive global influence. US officials argue that giving China these perks is like letting a billionaire shop with food stamps. It's unfair and gives China an outsized advantage in global trade and finance. So the US pulled an old law out of the archives. The PRC is not a Developing Country Act from 2003. This law requires American diplomats to persuade international organizations to strip China of its developing status. If they succeed, China will lose access to cheap financing and favorable trade terms. Washington hopes this will slow China's rise and prevent it from becoming a fully fledged superpower. But this isn't just about fairness. The United States is afraid of losing global leadership in a world where China is quickly catching up. As part of this campaign, the US has already formally demanded that the Asian Development Bank cut off loans to China, declaring the country too rich for such assistance. Leading this push is US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. His goal is clear: to weaken China's influence in Asia. But the US didn't stop with the Asian Development Bank. It's going further, targeting the most powerful institutions of all, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. These institutions are true financial giants. The World Bank helps poor countries build roads, schools, and hospitals, while the International Monetary Fund steps in during times of crisis, when nations face debt, inflation, or economic collapse. These organizations are meant to serve the entire world, but now the United States wants them to follow American rules. And once again, Scott Bessent enters the picture. In a recent speech to investors, he essentially accused the World Bank and the IMF of failing at their job. But what he really meant was something else. They're not doing what America wants. He didn't say the United States would withdraw from these institutions, although Trump and his supporters have been calling for that for a long time. But he made it clear, if the World Bank and the IMF don't start playing by the rules and remove China from the club of developing countries, the US could pull its financial support, and that's no idle threat. America is one of the main sources of funding for both institutions. So this pressure is serious. Global trade is slowing not just because of tariffs themselves, but because no one knows what the United States will do next. This doesn't look like leadership. It looks more like blackmail. And other countries are beginning to question, is it even wise to trust America? If Washington keeps up this pressure campaign, the world might simply decide it's better to move on without the US. This isn't just bad diplomacy, it's genuinely dangerous. A broken global system without American leadership could end with the United States isolated, and they may not even realize it until it's too late. But this kind of tactic is nothing new. The US has long used its financial influence to steer global institutions. Back in 2021, an American senator pushed through legislation that prohibited the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank from issuing loans to China. He argued that it was unfair to make American taxpayers help an enemy. The law passed quickly, showing just how determined Washington is to control who gets funding and who doesn't. But here's the paradox. The US complains that China receives loans while ignoring inconvenient facts. Millions of people in China still live below the poverty line. The average income per person is just $16,000 a year, compared to $82,500 in the US. And let's not forget, America itself borrows money, including from China, over $750 billion worth. If taking loans is such a bad thing, why is it okay for the US? But in truth, this isn't about fairness, it's about fear. The US is especially anxious about China's Belt and Road Initiative, a sweeping program through which China funds infrastructure projects across the globe. In Washington, these are called dangerous loans, pointing to countries that struggle to pay them back. But they rarely mention that China often renegotiates terms, and that Western banks are usually unwilling to invest in such risky, yet critically needed projects. The United States wants to cut China off from global sources of financing, forcing it to rely solely on its own resources, or on the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the very bank the US has deliberately refused to join. All of this is framed as a defense of fairness, but in reality, it's an attempt to wear China down. While the US is striking blow after blow, China is not sitting idle. On the contrary, it is acting smartly, strategically, and most importantly, with a long-term vision. Despite mounting American pressure, China's partnerships with other countries are only getting stronger. So how is it managing to do this? First, China is deepening economic ties with regions like Asia and the Middle East. For example, Qatar's largest investment group, the Qatar Investment Authority, recently bought a 10% stake in a Chinese financial company. That speaks volumes. Gulf nations trust China's economy and are willing to invest serious capital. Moreover, in just the first 3 months of 2025, China's trade volume with ASEAN countries from Southeast Asia reached $234 billion. That's a massive figure, clearly showing how vital China is to its neighbors. And of course, there's the Belt and Road Initiative, a massive program through which China helps countries build roads, ports, railways, and other infrastructure. In 2025, between 146 and 150 countries are participating. Despite American pressure, many of them continue to cooperate with China because they see real benefits. New infrastructure helps their economies grow. While the US brandishes threats, China offers investment and collaboration. And in that kind of environment, it's much easier for many countries to say yes to Beijing than to listen to American ultimatums. And here's where things get even more serious. What truly worries the United States isn't just China getting trade privileges or expanding its global partnerships. The real nightmare for American leaders is China's industrial power. Factories across the country are producing everything from high-speed trains to cutting-edge artificial intelligence systems. And China isn't just catching up to the US. In many areas, it's already ahead. To stop this momentum, Washington is throwing everything it can into the fight. Beyond trying to strip China of its developing nation status, the US has introduced sweeping restrictions on trade and exports. The goal is to slow China's progress, but every newly opened factory and every technological breakthrough proves one thing: Beijing isn't backing down, it's doubling down. While the US tries to hold China back, Beijing is redrawing the map of global finance. China is aggressively promoting the yuan in international trade. Today, state-owned banks already process 40% of cross-border transactions in yuan. And this is not just symbolic. It allows China to bypass US sanctions, make the yuan more attractive to foreign partners, and draw capital into the Chinese market. According to Goldman Sachs, even a 1% rise in the yuan can boost Chinese stocks by 3%. Now imagine this. Global trade in US dollars exceeds $4 trillion. Even small shifts could seriously shake the entire global financial system. But even that's not the whole story. China is challenging not only in trade and currency, it's going head-to-head with America's tech giants. Take BYD, for example, the leader in China's electric vehicle market. The company is cutting prices by 10 to 30%, putting serious pressure on Tesla in Europe, Southeast Asia, and beyond. This isn't just a price war, it's a clear signal. From electric cars to AI chips, China is targeting industries where the United States once reigned supreme. And make no mistake, this isn't defense, it's offense. China is building its own parallel systems in finance, energy, and technology. Beijing isn't just reacting to US pressure, it's designing a new future. A future where the rules are no longer written in Washington. So today, the real question is not whether China can withstand American pressure. The real question is, can the United States survive in the era of China's rise? Subscribe to the channel to stay informed about how the global balance of power is shifting. See you in the next video.